بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وإمام المرسلين سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التعويل وجعلنا من خيرة أمة سيدنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. We seek Allah's protection from knowledge that does not benefit, from a heart that has no khushu, from a nafs that's never had enough, from an eye that does not tear, from a dua that's not heard. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, everyone's doing well. And we're back after a couple of weeks break. There was that, I said that during our teacher does winter spring Moulid, and I wanted to take a break during that because they have it every day in the evening. So hopefully people have been kind of either attended or watching online and benefited greatly. I think the kind of topic this time around, mashallah, was really good. And actually I kind of used that topic when I spoke briefly in our Maulid, in our masjid. So I have this thing and obviously I kind of just keep like brief little reminders, like, you know, it's not like a speech, but because I can't give these Friday speeches everyone kind of gives on Maulids. We tend to spend a lot of time during Maulids kind to justify and you know, around the fact that why we should be doing it, etc. But you're kind of preaching to the wrong people. The fact that people have attended that gathering, it means that they kind of celebrate the Maulid. So it is kind of really pointless you saying the same thing to them. And if you were to just take small bit about it, and then they'll try to go out and argue the point, and that's when arguments start. So I think it's about, the point is to kind of enlighten about the Prophet ﷺ, you know, ensure that they can learn more about the Prophet ﷺ, increase their love for the Prophet ﷺ, these kind of things. So I mentioned about the fact that, you know, your relationship to towards the Prophet ﷺ. What is your relationship with the Prophet ﷺ? Okay, I mean, every one of us has a relationship with the Prophet ﷺ, whether we know it or not. We have a relationship. Okay, to where it is, what extent it is, and how much you push for it, etc. You know, to increase it further. You know, have that bond. That's down to the individual, and everyone's different. And the question here is that, you know, why should we have a relationship with the Prophet ﷺ? You know, so briefly, I mean, obviously, because I can go on and on about this, but you know, we look at things in the past. If we look at things in the past in terms of what the Prophet ﷺ did for us, you know, in his time for his ummah. What he continued would do, stay awake at night, pray for his ummah, etc., etc. Sometimes people do not relate to that. They can't relate to that, or we weren't in that time. You know, we can't kind of relate to it. Those that were around him, they saw his miracles, they saw him, they saw his character, etc. They can relate to it. Okay. Then kind of you got the present time as well. The present time we're looking in, we look at the Prophet ﷺ as a role model. We learn from what he did throughout as our teacher, and then to have a successful life, we follow him in that sense. But if you really want to, then okay, fair enough, then let's ignore, even if we ignore the past, even if we ignore the present, you look ahead. Although you kind of, it's a combination of all of these, but let's look ahead. The akhirah. It's when you truly will appreciate and understand the value of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay. What he does for us on Judgment Day, and you know, like brief encounters, like you know, everyone going to different prophets, which you've all heard, and then finally come to the Prophet ﷺ, because they're all saying, not me, nafsi, nafsi, you know, I'm for myself today. And then finally they reach the Prophet ﷺ, and he says, yes, this is why I was created. He says himself, this is why I was created. So intercession, this is why I was created. You know, and remember, when it comes to intercession of the Prophet ﷺ, you had, first of all, you have what? Intercession for everyone. Muslim or non-Muslim, remember, because when we're all panicking, we're all over the place, and there's so much fear in us. Even the description of when hellfire is brought as a beast, and the Prophet ﷺ is the one who stands in front, kind of stopping hellfire, which is not being controlled by angels. Later on, when there's all this panic, etc., the Prophet ﷺ goes into sajda for us. The first intercession is for everyone in the sense that let the reckoning begin, let judgment day begin, kind of the reckoning begin. Everyone's in so much fear, the hisab, etc. Let it all begin. That's for everyone, whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim. Then obviously, you have later on the intercession for Muslims specifically. Then you have for the kind of elite, kind of the high-level Muslims and all that. There's so much that you can speak about. If anything you want to take away, then just look at that. Just look at Judgment Day. What the Prophet ﷺ will do for us. Inshallah, what the Prophet ﷺ will do for us. And that should kind of draw you closer to the Prophet ﷺ. Really appreciate it. Okay? But yeah, take this opportunity, read as much salawat, read about the Prophet ﷺ. The purpose of the Seerah classes when I started doing this Islamic Essential modules course, and we started on like Aqidah and Fiqh, etc. From the very go, right at the start, people would say to me, can we cover Seerah? Can we cover Seerah? And I thought, look, Seerah is probably for me right at the end, because then it kind of, Seerah involves everything, and then you can relate to everything as well. Okay, we're going to learn today, for example, one of the incidents that brought about a fiqh ruling. Okay, you find it in the Seerah because you already know it now. Then it links up to this is where the incident took place. So you see that throughout the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And the purpose was for us to love the Prophet ﷺ, increase our love for the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, and honestly, that is my ultimate goal, is just that increase your love for the Prophet ﷺ. Obviously, I don't justify in the way I kind of present the class, etc., but I still am hopeful that you take something away that will then increase your love for the Prophet ﷺ, or then kind of gives you that hunger to want to go off and study with someone who kind of knows their stuff, proper teacher, or start listening more about or reading more about the Prophet ﷺ to increase your love further, inshallah. Okay, we continue, inshallah. And salawat again, and we focus so much on it in the Rabiul Awwal, but salawat is something that we should be reading all the time. It's a kind of sign of each salawat, you're just saying, to the Prophet ﷺ, I love you. To the Prophet ﷺ, we love you. Continually. Remember, you're not, the Prophet ﷺ rank is increased, but you're doing it for yourself here. Okay, you're doing it for yourself here. The Prophet ﷺ, your salawat is presented to the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, with your name. Okay, with your name, that this person, son, daughter of this person, then salawat. Okay, the kind of this wording is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings life back into my body. That's just way of wording, because consider the fact that salawat is being read, so it means continuously the Prophet ﷺ is alive, and your deeds are presented to him. Okay, like I said, these are all things that you guys know, we speak about so much, but continuing the salawat, one Durood Sharif, kind of it gives you 10 times the reward, removes 10 sins and increases your rank tenfold. It's just one salawat and one Durood Sharif. So as much as possible, send salawat from the Prophet ﷺ. Inshallah, let's continue then. Let's continue with the Seerah, the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the biography of the Prophet ﷺ, and lessons that we can learn from it. So a couple of weeks ago, or 2-3 weeks ago, we spoke about the incident of Banu Mustaliq, and what all happened in terms of where they were kind of surprised. The Prophet ﷺ it was like a surprise attack, and they kind of took control of everything. They took him hostage, and then you've got it was close, described as princess, the chief's daughter, Seerah Juwairiya, our mother, Seerah Juwairiya, and how then, the Prophet ﷺ proposes marriage to her, she accepts, and how then that kind of changes the dynamics completely. How then all of these prisoners are released, because if they are relatives of the Prophet ﷺ, then we don't want to keep them captive. We don't want any ransom for them. And in this expedition, you had the munafiq, hypocrites, who actually joined in because they realized it was an easy win, and we'll get plenty of war booty. But when everyone was doing this, they had no choice but to also release the prisoners. Okay, and as I mentioned, and as kind of we finished upon, that as they were heading back, incidents took place. And one of the incidents again was that small fight that took place in the well, and then you have Abdullah ibn Ubay kind of, like we brought them along, and look what they're doing to us, and this and that, and it's like we're the true leaders of Yathrib. He still considers Yathrib, and he spoke about, we're going to remove the kind of disgraced ones. We're going to remove the disgraced one and replace them with the honored one. So he was referring to the Prophet ﷺ. That he's going to remove the Prophet ﷺ and replace him, like himself. He's going to be the leader, the honored one. This was a coup, basically, an answer coup, and kind of word spread, and there was so much anger, and kind of almost swords pulled out, spears ready, and all that. The Prophet ﷺ had to calm things down. Now, the reason why this is important, actually, because this part is important because of what's going to happen next. Okay, so this is the kind of situation. Word is still around. Abdullah ibn Ubay is kind of thinking, wait a minute, he's done this, he's made an announcement and whatnot. Now what? Is he going to be punished? And then we finished right at the end with the son of Abdullah ibn approaching the Prophet ﷺ and requesting that if you're planning on executing him, let me execute him, because I won't be able to take if someone else does it, even though it's justified. I will not still be able to take as a son, because my family tie is so strong. Let me do it myself. Okay, and the Prophet ﷺ says, look, I have no plan to do that. But Abdullah ibn Ubay did not know this. Okay, so this was the kind of atmosphere. This is the surrounding. This is what was taking place. Okay, so we're kind of following it now. Kind of we're at the point of the return journey from Banu Mustalik. This is the return journey from Banu Mustalik. Okay, so one of the important things that happens in this particular journey now is that the Prophet ﷺ, so like the Prophet ﷺ would go on his journeys, he would take one or two wives with him, and he would kind of determine it by casting lots, etc., or something like that, or kind of putting a name in the hat, what we say. But anyway, the Prophet ﷺ would take one or two wives with him. And this one in particular, you had Sayyidah Aisha, who accompanied the Prophet ﷺ, and there was a Sayyidah Aisha. That there's kind of difference in terms of was there another one of his wives with him, Sayyidah Zainab or not? But there definitely obviously was Sayyidah Aisha because of the events that take place now. Sayyidah Aisha عنها, now even if we go according to like kind of the hadith of her own account, she was like in her like 16, 17, 18-year-old. That was her age. Okay, but in her teens. Okay, now the way these kind of journeys work, they would kind of stop off at various places, and kind of during one of these stops, you have that famous race between the Prophet ﷺ and Sayyidah Aisha that takes place. Okay, so kind of they would just come messing about, okay, and said actually kind of kind of effectively then she started to race the Prophet ﷺ in the desert, and the Prophet ﷺ beat her. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ beat her because now she kind of had gone a bit bigger. Because so remember, this was the second race they've had now. So after the Prophet ﷺ beats her, he tells her this, and this is Sayyidah Aisha mentioned this herself, and he says that this is for that. Okay, this is for that, meaning this is for that first race that we had. So the first race long ago in Makkah, when she was still quite young. I don't know if she had been in the house, somewhere, she had something in her hand. The Prophet ﷺ said, bring it to me. And she said no, and she kind of runs off, and then the Prophet ﷺ chasing her, and maybe as you do with kids kind of thing, you play, you let them win kind of thing, maybe that was the kind of scenario. Okay, but the Prophet ﷺ, like I said, he beat her, and he goes, look, this is for that. Okay, and you remember the incident, and he mentioned it. Okay, now what else happened? So Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, Mother Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, that she had a necklace that she loved because the Prophet ﷺ had given it to her, and she would lose it a lot because of whatever reason, the kind of clasp of it, whatever, was loose and it would fall off. She would lose it a lot. And obviously, for those of you who have studied fiqh with me, you should remember this story. You get many fiqh rulings on the back of it. Okay, so what would happen when you travel, and especially with an army like this, you travel from oasis to oasis to oasis. Okay, so it's basically where there's water, etc. So you travel from a place of water to another place of water to another place of water. That's the way you travel. Okay, and they had been at this one oasis, filled up all the water and so forth, and then they had traveled on the next oasis. It was some distance ahead. The next, what's called the marhala, the next manzil, the next stopping point. But they had stopped for a bit of rest. As they got up to leave, Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha had realized that her necklace had fallen off. She went and she told the Prophet ﷺ, my necklace has fallen off. The Prophet ﷺ said, okay, no, we look for it. Okay, so they spent a lot of time looking for it before eventually finding it. And according to some narration was that it was actually where she was sitting, or where the camel was sitting, it was under there. Okay, but eventually they find it. Okay, and then what happens? The result of this is that because it took so long, the Prophet ﷺ decides, we're not going to travel any further. So they're stuck in between two oases, because they time it accordingly. So they know they'll set off at this point, then they'll reach the next oasis at this point, and they'll have plenty of water, or they can then fill up their water. But now they're stuck in the middle there. Okay, and the problem, because they only had so much water. Okay, they only had so much water, and word went around the campus. The word went around the campus to why this has happened, and then word reaches Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, because obviously they'd seen that the reason why it was Sayyidina Aisha looking out for her necklace, and they realized that the Prophet ﷺ loved Sayyidina Aisha ideally, and so he would stop an entire caravan for the sake of Sayyidina Aisha finding her necklace. But now they got no water, and they didn't know what to do about prayer. Okay. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq was embarrassed about this. So what does he do? He goes off and goes and tells off his daughter. Shouts at his daughter, because of his daughter's silliness about her silly necklace. No one's got enough water. How are we going to pray? Do we have enough to drink? On one hand, this is he's very annoyed. Okay, he tells her, and she gets very upset. Okay. She gets very upset about what has happened. She realizes that because of her, now look at this, people don't have enough water. And then what happens is the Prophet ﷺ gets revelation, and it's the revelation, the verse of Tayammum. Okay, the verse of Tayammum is revealed, and this is very, very important verse, because there are many legal rulings that come from this verse. Okay, the verse of Tayammum is revealed, and all the believers, if you cannot it's like all believers, if you cannot find water, then wipe the dust, and wipe your hands and your faces, and you can pray with that. And this was something, again, it's like a minor incident in terms of the Seerah, but it had massive implications from that point onwards. Okay, the reason for the revelation, the reason for the revelation of dispensation of Tayammum is the forgetfulness of Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, and when this verse was revealed, the companions immediately realized how important and how far-reaching this was, and they traveled, because they traveled through the desert, all the time. One of the major concerns is, how do we have enough water? Because you have to carry the water along with you, okay? So how do you have enough water, to drink, but not only drink, but enough water to make wudu, and sometimes to even make ghusl. Okay, if you need to make ghusl, how much water do we need to carry with us? And suddenly, the amount of water that a believer has to carry has kind of drastically reduced. Okay, and this is something major, because when you're traveling through the desert, you want to get as light as possible when you're traveling. Okay, in the majority of Muslim lands, So like I said, the amount of water kind of shrunk that you had to carry around with you. Okay, so this was a tremendous blessing. And so the companions went back to Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq and told him, Abu Bakr Siddiq goes, he goes to his daughter and congratulates her after just telling her off. Okay, this was how the Prophet ﷺ was. So just after just telling her off, then there's good news. He goes and congratulates her, and he says, you know what? Allah has revealed, because of you, you lost your necklace, okay? And the companions told Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq that this is not the first blessing that your family have brought to us, okay? So that's the incident of the necklace, the result of which we have tayammum, and obviously I'm not going to go into the ruling of tayammum, but we've covered the rulings around tayammum. There are specific rulings around tayammum, it's like, so many times we're sitting here and you'll think, well, actually sometimes it's, we had Severn Trent seemed to be having a lot of issues recently, and a few of the times at night the water's kind of shut off, so the person was starting, oh, wait a minute, at what point is it then can we use can we do tayammum? But most of us kind of got water in the house in bottles, etc. or not. But it's a good opportunity, because I remember then I went off and did wudu. I had prayed my Isha, but I always, before you go to sleep, or you should always be in a state of wudu. And I try my best, inshallah, and I advise others as well that always be in a state of wudu. There was a bit of water in a bottle, and I used that to make my wudu. And it's a good practice, actually, because, how we're used to just wasting so much water through the, and just open the tap and then that's it. It's something actually that I would say learn, but I came across and utilized a lot when I went on Hajj, because we were traveling, and now obviously they've got a lot of stations, etc., and make life a lot easier. But when we were traveling, you had this certain kind of wudu areas, though, but they would all be so busy, you just could not get a chance. And I would always carry a bottle of water with me, and literally half a bottle of water was enough to make wudu, if you do it properly. Anyway, moving on then. So that was the incident, okay? Now, the camp kind of stopped a second time, okay? And say that Aisha, she said she had to go to relieve herself, okay, right? So, and look at this. I mean, look at the blessings we have. She had to go away, and she describes this later on, actually. So actually, I'll leave it for later on when she describes it later on. But anyway, she had to go relieve herself. Okay, so she goes off, toilet, whatever, relieve herself, and she goes away. The companion kind of pick up what they call the hoda, off the hoda is like it's a covered carriage, okay, that kind of sits on top of a camel. Okay, like a carriage that sits on top of a camel. And they picked it up and put it on top, and then off they went. They did not know that saying that Aisha was not inside when they picked it up, because she was quite light. And that's how Sayyidah Aisha described them when she's describing it. That's how she described it. She said they did not know I was in it because I was quite light. So they picked her up, they thought she was in it, and they put it on the camel, and off we go. Okay, off we go. Now, what would happen is that someone would always kind of hang about or travel behind. Now, I've heard different kind of reasons behind it. I mean, the description I've given is that it's because of security. Okay, so there's always would be someone like a few hours later certain areas that the route is. So one would stay behind just so there's protection, just in case someone plans to attack, etc. The other was that when they leave places, to ensure nothing has been left behind or no one's been left behind, etc. And this was the thing, okay? And in this instance, it was Safwan who was responsible for this, okay? So Sayyidah Aisha eventually, she comes back to the site of the camp and she finds everyone's gone. Okay, she's stranded in the desert. And she obviously, she knows how things work, and she thought, at some point someone will come to the site. So she sits down and she stays put. And time goes on, and eventually she falls off to sleep. Okay, she falls off to sleep. Now what happens is, then Safwan, obviously, when he comes, eventually he comes to the site and he's standing over Sayyidah Aisha, and as soon as he sees Sayyidah Aisha, he says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun. It's almost like, what a disaster, of all the people to be left behind. But he doesn't say anything after that. That's all he says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun, and he doesn't say anything after that. He asks no questions, nothing. Sayyidah Aisha kind of wakes up, whatnot, and he just walks away. Okay, he walks away, makes the camel kneel down for her, and they set off. Okay, he doesn't say a single word to her. And to show everyone, Safwan kind of like there's nothing to hide, etc. Safwan walks into Medina in broad daylight. And it's like we've got nothing to hide. He walks into Medina in broad daylight, and the hypocrites spot that. Okay, the hypocrites spot it, and they spot an opportunity, and tongues start to wag. Okay, tongues start to wag. It was actually Abdullah ibn Ubay. Remember that we covered in last lesson that, and I've said at the start of this lesson that, he said, look, we're going to remove the humiliated one and we'll be replaced by the honored one. As in, like, we're going to remove, from his side, he's saying that we're going to remove the Prophet ﷺ and replace him with myself. And this got everyone angry because he basically announced a coup, and this guy, companions are kind of fuming. So he needed a kind of, something to divert the attention. Okay, something to divert the attention. And these kind of hypocrites, they were kind of shayateen at work, basically. And this is it. He just needed something to divert the attention. And what he says was, something has happened between them two. That's all he says. He says, something has happened between them two. Okay, that's all he says, and that's all he takes. And that starts it all. Okay, so kind of word spreads. Most people are not kind of malicious but curious, and that's also the problem. Gossip of the day, etc. What's happening? Oh, did you hear this? Did you hear that? Oh yeah, they walked in like this, and oh yeah, what's your view on it? Okay, so the majority of people are kind of reckless. The hypocrites know how to get to the Prophet ﷺ was to target his beloved wife. Everyone knew she was the most beloved to him. Okay, to target his beloved wife. Okay, in this situation, actually, it's narrated is that, and again, this is saying that Aisha is narrating this in the long hadith, and we're going to cover that actually. Move on. One of the best responses that was given by Sayyidina Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. So his wife kind of says, she comes to him and says, oh, did you hear about Aisha? This is what happened, and he walked in with Safwan and in broad daylight, and these people are saying this and people are saying that. Oh, what do you think? You think anything happened? What do you think? And he responds to her. He says to her, would you do anything like that? Okay, would you do anything like that? And she's kind of saying, oh, of course not, never. Why would I? No chance. I've never do anything like that. And he says, Aisha is better than you. Okay, Aisha is better than you. Kind of basically, if you think, don't even think about that, then Aisha is better than you. So don't even entertain it. Okay, don't even entertain it. Then what you have is kind of three people among the companions that hold kind of they noble companions, but I suppose it was a learning curve for them, but they kind of brought about this gossip and took it forward. The first of those was Hamna bint Jash, amongst others Abdullah bin Jash. She was the sister of Zainab. Okay, so the sister-in-law of the Prophet ﷺ. So some commentate, and again, these are commentators commentate. You can almost try to give, you can try to make excuses for them, as you would say, okay. But they commentate that maybe she thinks that she's doing a favor to Sayyidina Zainab, by entertaining this and bringing about that, there could be some truth in it. So the hope. Remember, they had these camps. The wives of the Prophet ﷺ, Sayyidina Aisha, one camp, was leader of one camp, and Zainab was leader of the other camp. So she had this view that, if we kind of bring Sayyidina Aisha down, it will increase the rank of Sayyidina Zainab. So she thought she was doing her sister a favor. Okay. However, Sayyidina Aisha praises Sayyidina Zainab. Okay, because when the Prophet ﷺ asked Sayyidina Zainab that, what do you think? And she says, she doesn't know of Aisha but good things. Of course, she would not do anything like that. And Sayyidina Aisha says in a hadith that Sayyidina Zainab was held back by her taqwa. So look at that. Even though there's this kind of, rivalry and all that, it is both such praise for each other. Okay, such praise for each other. The second of those was, Hassan ibn Thabit, the poet. And again, the commentators talk about, a poet always has something to say. He's always got some kind of view to give. People always come to the poet and ask, what do you say, and come out with your eloquent words, etc. Always got something to say. Okay. However, Sayyidina Aisha would hate that anyone speak bad about him, about Hassan ibn Thabit, because Hassan ibn Thabit would defend the Prophet ﷺ with his poetry. So kind of his defense of the Prophet ﷺ was more beloved to her. So she would hate if anyone would speak anything against Hassan ibn Thabit, regardless of what, he kind of took forward this slander. And the third was Mr. her cousin. And they say, look, they're unsure about why he did this. Like when there's no motive, etc. in anything. And we'll speak about it a bit later, Mr. Actually, linked to the Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq. Okay, but now initially, Sayyidina Aisha does not know anything any better about what's going on. Okay, she actually becomes ill because this journey, she becomes ill after that. She got ill after this particular journey, and she went to go stay with her parents. Okay. Now this account is described nicely by Martin Links because he cites it straight from the hadith. This is long hadith. This is long hadith account narrated by Sayyidina Aisha herself. It's one of the kind of longest hadiths in the works of hadith. But anyway, Martin Links kind of speaks about this. So I'm going to read through. We've taken a bit longer than I would have thought, but I still want to finish this section. So we'll continue. Hopefully it won't be too long. So Martin Ling says then, not long after her return to Medina, Aisha fell ill. By that time, the slander that the hypocrites had whispered against herself and Safwan was being repeated throughout the city. Few took it seriously, though among those who did was her own cousin Mistah of the clan of Muttalib. But whether they believed it or not, everyone knew of it except herself. So she still didn't know about this. Okay, she was none of the less conscious of a certain reserve on the part of the Prophet ﷺ, and she missed the loving attention which he had shown her in her other illnesses. He would come into the room and say to those who were nursing her, "How are you all today?" simply including her with the others. Deeply wounded but too proud to complain, she asked him his permission to go to her parents' house where her mother could nurse her as though, in the process of, as though you wish to do, he said. So, kaifa khalukunna, he would come in, kaifa khalukunna, like, how are you all ladies today? She knew something was up because he would specifically ask for her first and then maybe, the rest of them. Okay? But yeah, so this was it. And again, he shows the loving nature of the Prophet ﷺ, little subtle things like that. She picked her up. To recount what took place in Aisha's own words, I went to my mother without any knowledge of what was being said and recovered from my illness some 20 days later. So 20 days or a month passes and she's still not aware of what's happening. Then one evening I went out with the mother of Mistah. Mistah Remember, cousin, the one who, kind of spreading this slander. Her mother was the sister of my father's mother. Okay, so the Abu Bakr Siddiq's aunt. So Misa was kind of the second cousin, her second cousin. Okay, and as she was walking beside me, she stumbled over her gown and exclaimed, "May Mista stumble." God's life, I said, that was an ill thing to say of a man of the immigrants who fought at Badr. She's defending him. How can you say someone about who fought at Badr? Okay. And then the response is, "O daughter of Abu Bakr," she said, "can it be that the news has not reached you?" "What news?" she said. Or what news? I said. This is the Sayyidah Aisha describing. Then she told me what the slanderers had said, and people were repeating it. "Can this be so?" I said. "By God, it is indeed," was her answer. And I returned home in tears, and I wept until I thought that my weeping would split my liver. So these were real difficult times, really difficult times. Okay, and just imagine what the Prophet ﷺ was going through. Okay, and we'll describe about that a bit later. "God forgive them," I said to my mother. "People talk, they talk." Because I said, you didn't even tell me. You knew what's going on. You did not tell me. And her mother says, "People talk, they talk, and they, there's not one word of it." "My little daughter," she asked, "take it not so heavily, for there is seldom a beautiful woman married to a man who loves her, but her fellow wives are full of gossip about her, and others repeat what they say. So I lay awake the whole of the night, and my tears flowed without ceasing." Okay. But in fact, whatever jealousies there may have been between one and another, because I was just about to comment on that, but obviously Martin Link mentions here anyway. The wives of the Prophet were all women of piety, and not one of them took any part. So the kind of response was, maybe the wives are gossiping and people just take it. But Martin Link says, well, actually, the wives were women of piety, and not one of them took any part in the spreading the slander. On the contrary, they defended Sayyidah Aisha and spoke well of her. Of those chiefly to blame, the nearest to the Prophet ﷺ's household was his cousin Hamna, Zainab's sister, who repeated the calumny, thinking thus to further her sister's interests. For it was generally thought that but for Aisha, Zainab would have been the Prophet's favourite wife, and Zainab suffered much from her sister's ill-conceived zeal on her behalf. Another of the slanders, in addition to Mistah, was the poet Hassan ibn Thabit, and in the background were Ibn Ubay and the other hypocrites who had started everything. The Prophet clearly hoped for a revelation, but when nothing came, he questioned not only his wives but also others near ones. So remember here, Prophet was waiting for revelation. Right? Same person. So remember this, and this is you need to understand, the same person that told the last lesson, the same person that told Haris about the camels you left in the valley, or Haris, what about the camels you left in the valley, etc. Just told Sayyidina Abbas about after Badr. What about the money you kept? So many of these things about the unseen, things he could not even know about. Okay, this is that same person here. Now, just quickly then on the unseen, and this is kind of important because people kind of misunderstand this sometimes when we talk about the unseen. Now, the Prophet ﷺ had vast knowledge. Okay, knowledge of the unseen. Remember, everything comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gives knowledge to whoever he wants, knowledge of the unseen to whoever wants. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge of everything. The Prophet ﷺ, no matter how great his knowledge is, it's limited. It comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and it's limited. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knowledge is unlimited. Okay, all knowing. This is what you need to understand. Then you don't have that perception in your mind. Remember, Sayyid Adam alayhi salam, when he was created, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught him the names of everything. When the angels kind of started asking him questions, he was just created. He's not seen all of these things, but he came out with the name of everything because it was given to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives knowledge to whoever he wants. Allah gives the unseen to whoever he wants. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ knew all those things, yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps the truth of this matter from the Prophet ﷺ. No revelation, no any other inspiration came to him. Part of the reason this was done, as Ruman, the mother of Sayyidina Aisha has mentioned, is that this was a very common thing. Slander, gossip, etc. These type of things happen all the time. So the Prophet ﷺ goes through this as a, part of the reason for this is that we would have an example. He went through it. How did he deal with it? We can't say, oh, he was the Prophet ﷺ, he was told. No, but he goes through the same way. So this is kind of how he dealt with it. So we use that as an example. Okay, we use that as an example. So there was no revelation. So the Prophet ﷺ questioned not only his wives but also others near ones. Usama ibn Zayd, who was the same age as Sayyidina Aisha. So Usama was Zayd, almost like his grandson. Because remember, Zayd was his kind of adopted son, although it was kind of clarified later that he's not the son of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay. Usama, who was the same age as Aisha, spoke vigorously in her defense. This is all a lie, he said. We know not but good of her. His mother, Ayman, was equally emphatic in praise of her. As for Ali, he said, good had not restricted thee, and there are many women besides her, but question her maidservant, she will tell the truth. So Sayyidina Ali says, like, same as Usama, but also he addressed, Prophet ﷺ, that if you are not pleased, you have other options, etc. However, still, question her maidservant then, basically. Question her maidservant if you want to. And so that's what the Prophet ﷺ does. So the Prophet ﷺ sent for her and said, "O Buraira, has thou ever seen in Aisha that might make you suspect her?" And she answers, "By him that sent thee with the truth, I know only good of her, and if it were otherwise, God would inform his messenger. I have no fault to find with Aisha, but that she is a girl, young in years, and when I am kneading dough and I bid her watch it, she will fall asleep and her pet lamb will come and eat it. I have blamed her for that more than once." So again, kind of her cooking. So imagine this is the slave of Sayyidina Aisha. And understand how the relationship is as well. That's the slave. It's almost like she's saying, I tell her off as like a mother. And the only thing I find her fault in her, that I have a go about, is the fact that when I tell her to watch the dough, she falls asleep and her pet lamb comes and eats it away. That's the only thing she could find. Okay, to kind of shout at her almost about. When next the Prophet ﷺ went to the mosque, he ascended the pulpit and having praised God, he said, "O people, what say you of men who injure me with regard to my family, reporting of them what is not true? By God, I know not but good of my household, and know but good of the man they speak of, who never entered a house of mine but I am with him." No sooner had he spoken that Usayd rose to his feet. So just there, so the Prophet ﷺ goes to the mosque and said, who's going to kind of almost defend me? He's had enough of this. Obviously the hypocrites and whoever's spreading this rumor, and he defends his wife at this point here. This is interesting here because he defends his wife, and one of the things was say that Aisha that he did not defend her, but maybe that thinking, but obviously he did not say to her, but he's defending his wife here because he mentioned it straight up. This is false. What's being said is false. So he's defending his wife and the man that Safwan. Again, he speaks highly of him. He's saying, why are these rumors being spread and who's going to do what about it? And then that's when Usayd kind of stood up and said, "O Messenger of God, if they are of Aus, we will deal with them. And if they be of our brethren Khazraj, then give us the command, for they deserve that their heads should be cut off." Okay, so he's saying, look, Rasulullah, if it's the people of Aus, we'll deal with them. If it's the person of Aus that's kind of spreading the rumor, we'll deal with them. And again, even if it's the person of Khazraj, we'll still deal with them. So you saw this, at the time of Jahiliyyah, ignorant times, this kind of fighting and fighting, this brought about then at that point. Okay, brought about that point. At that point, before he had finished, Sa'd ibn Ubadah was already on his feet, for Hassan was of Hazraj, and so were the men who had certainly hatched the slander in the beginning. God's life, though lies, he said, you shall not slay them, nor can you. Neither would or have spoken this had they been of of your people. God's life, they said, Usayd, slay them, we shall, and though you are a hypocrite, okay, striving on behalf of hypocrites. By this time, the two tribes were about to come to grips with one another, but the Prophet motioned them to desist, and descending from the pulpit, he quietened them and sent them away in peace. So the Prophet was really disappointed that, look, back to this old ways. Okay, so this fighting much, you got, they were getting destroyed within. 10,000 strong could not destroy them. Okay, they just kind of come on the back from 10,000 strong could not destroy them. I'm saying that is kind of attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, a weak hadith, but it's more strongly attributed to one of the early Muslims. We have come from a lesser jihad, kind of swords, etc., fighting, to a greater jihad, the jihad within, with the enemy within, jihad al-nafs. Okay, weak hadith, but the meaning is brought out by Quran and other sayings of the Prophet ﷺ. For example, the saying that the Prophet ﷺ, the worst of your enemies lie within. So kind of this situation is kind of tearing the community apart. Okay. Moving on then, if Aisha had known that the Prophet ﷺ had defended her in public from the pulpit, she would no doubt have been greatly comforted. But she knew nothing of it at that time. She was only aware of his questioning others about her, which suggested that he did not know what to think, and this greatly distressed her. She did not expect him of himself to look into her soul, for she knew that his knowledge of hidden things came to him from the next world. I only know that what God gives me to know, he would say. He did not seek to read the thoughts of men, but she expected him to know that her devotion to him was such as to make the things she was accused of impossible. In any case, it was not enough that he should himself believe Aisha and Safwan to be innocent. The situation was a grave one, and it was imperative to have evidence which would convince the whole community. To this end, Aisha herself had proved the least helpful of all concerned. It was now time that her silence should be broken. Not that anything she said could be enough to resolve the crisis, but the Quran promised the questions asked during the period of his revelation would be answered. In the present case, the Prophet had filled the air with questions. The same question reiterated to different persons, but for the promised answer to be given by heaven, it was perhaps necessary that the question should already have been put to the person most closely involved. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ had not spoken to Aisha about this. And the commentator saying as he did not want to hurt her feelings. So this is the time now where he speaks to Aisha about it. So she says, I was with my parents, said Aisha, and I had wept for 2 nights and a day. And while they were sitting with me, a woman from the helpers asked if she could join us, and I bade her enter, and she sat and wept with me. Then the Prophet entered and took his seat. Nor had he sat with me since people began to say that, what they said of me. A month had passed, basically, since all this was happening. And no tidings had come to him about me from heaven. After uttering the testification, so he sat down and he, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, so the testification, after uttering that, and again, this is all being described by Sayyidina Aisha in the hadith. He said, O Aisha, I have been told such and such a thing concerning you. And if you are innocent, surely God will declare your innocence. And if you have done, that is wrong, then ask forgiveness of God and repent unto Him. For verily, if the slave confesses his sin and then repent, God relents unto him. Okay, so Ibn Hajar actually commentates on this, that the Prophet ﷺ here, when he's speaking as a messenger here. Now, as a husband, as a messenger, as he would tell anyone else that, if you're innocent, God claim you're innocent, but if you are not, then ask for forgiveness. Okay, ask for forgiveness. Now, what you have is, if you want to kind of see the personality of Sayyidah Aisha, you'll see it now. The next part, you'll see it now. So he says this, and then she says, no sooner had he spoken that my tears ceased to flow. So she goes, no sooner has he said this that I stopped crying. I stopped crying. And I said to my father, I turned to my father and I said, answer the messenger of God for me. Kind of answer him for me. And he responds, I don't know what to say, I know not what to say. Then I turned to my mother and I said to my mother the same thing. And I was no more than a girl, young in years, and there was not much of the Quran that I could recite. Okay, so she turns to her father and says, answer him. She says, look, I don't know what to say. And the mother again answered him, and she goes, look, I don't know what to say. Kind of, the both trying to say, well, he's not said anything wrong. As a messenger, this is what he's saying. He's not said anything wrong. What do you want us to say to him? Then she's almost like she's saying, then it's like a case of, okay, I'm on my own. And then what she says to all three of them, then basically, it's like me, we, all three of you kind of thing. She says to them that I'm not, I don't know much Quran, but I was a young girl. But then I said, I know well that you have heard what men are saying, and it had settled in your souls, and you have believed it. And if I say unto you that I am innocent, and God know that I am innocent, you will not believe me. So if I say I'm innocent, you won't believe me. Whereas if I confess to that which God knows I'm guiltless of, you will believe me. So if I can confess to something that I have not done, then you'll believe me, kind of thing. What you want from me. Then I groped in my mind for the name of Jacob. So I thought about the name of Jacob, but I could not remember it. So I said, but I will say as the father of Joseph said. So she couldn't think of the name of Yaqub alayhi salam. So she says, as the father of Joseph said, beautiful patience must be mine, and God is he of whom help is to be asked against what they say. Then I turned to my couch and I lay on it, hoping that God would declare me innocent. Okay, not that I thought he would send down a revelation. So she thought, I was hoping that he will declare my innocence, or some kind of dream the Prophet gets some kind of inspiration, what or not. She did not think that a revelation would come, Quranic revelation would come. So I can't. For it seemed to me that I was too paltry for my case to be spoken of in the Quran. So it's like I'm too paltry for my case to be spoken in the Quran. Okay, but I was hoping that the Prophet would see in his sleep a vision that would exculpate me. He remained sitting in our company, and all of us were still present when a revelation came to him. He was seized with the pangs which seized him at such times, and as it were, pearls of sweat dripped from him, although it was a wintry day. And see, this is the kind of the descriptions we get when revelation is coming. So even in the cold winter, the Prophet ﷺ would still start to sweat when revelation would come. Okay. Then when he was relieved of the pressure, he said in a voice that vibrated with gladness, "O Aisha, praise God, for he has declared thee innocent." Then my mother said, Aisha, my mother said, arise and go to the Messenger of God. Kind of go to the Messenger of God, like thank him, or, give him a whatnot, go to him. And she said, and I said, nay, by God, I will not rise and go to him. I will praise none but God. She said, no, I'm not going to go to him. I'm going to praise the one who's sent my innocence. Praise God. Now, there's so much commentary that can be said about this. So remember, saying that Aisha, her situation has been mentioned in the Quran. Now, he mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent down this specifically for her. Now, imagine how she's feeling. She's overwhelmed. She's overjoyed that she gets a mention in the Quran. This situation gets mentioned in the Quran by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. So it's like kind of next level for her. It's only, it's not me and the Prophet ﷺ, it's me and Allah directly, like I'm going to thank him. He's the one who sent it through. So, we're running late, we're already running over, but I could speak so much about this. So the words of expectation were, verily they were brought forth the lie at a party amongst you, when you took it upon your tongues, uttering with your mouth that whereof you had no knowledge, You counted it but a trifle, yet in the sight of God it is enormous. Why said you not what when you heard it, to speak of this not for us? Glory be to thee. This is a monstrous calumny. God biddeth you beware of every repeating the like thereof if you are believers. Okay, so the ayah revealed not only her innocence, but admonishing the community. Some commentators say that the anger towards those who slander, say that Aisha radiallahu anha, is unlike the anger you see anywhere else in the Quran regarding any group of people. Ibn Abbas would say that anyone who commits a sin and asks forgiveness, Allah would forgive, except about those who talked about saying that Aisha, that was a kind of severe sin. It requires another level of tawbah. Okay. The new revelation also dwelt upon the whole question of adultery, and while prescribing the penalty, it likewise prescribed as the penalty for slandering honorable women, that the slanderers should be scourged, flogging. This sentence was carried out upon Mistah and Hassan and Hamna, who had been most explicit in spreading the, this kind of this slander, this rumor, and who confessed their guilt. But the hypocrites who had been more insidious had none the less been only implicit, nor did they confess to have had any part in it. So the Prophet preferred not to pursue the matter, but to leave them to God. Okay, so this is interesting. So the flogging carried out, although the hypocrites and Abdullah ibn Ubay were left. Okay, and the Prophet said, leave them to God, because remember, the purpose of the flogging here is that you're getting punished here, so you don't get punished in the hereafter. Okay, and there's a kind of incident which involves the Prophet and a lady, who committed zina, and she wanted the had punishment, etc. And the Prophet kept sending her back, because at the end of the day she wanted the punishment, because she'd rather be punished here than the hereafter. But we don't have the time, but I could have mentioned that as an example as well. It's a case of, the hypocrites, they're going to have so much of a punishment. And if they get punished here, that punishment in the hereafter will be probably lessened, because they've already been punished for this incident. It's a case of they weren't punished, your punishment will come in the hereafter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish you in the hereafter. Okay, so we're just near the end now. Okay, I'm just going to finish off this, and then let me see. I might quickly, we're going to run up our way over, so I might as well going to finish it off, inshallah. So Abu Bakr had been in the habit of giving his kinsman Mistah an allowance of money on account of his poverty. But now he said, never again by God will I give unto Mistah, and never again will I show him favor after what he has said against Aisha, and after the woe he has brought upon us. But there now came the revelation, let not the men of dignity and wealth amongst you swear that they will not give unto kinsmen and unto the needy, and unto those who have migrated for the sake of God. Let them forgive and let them be indulged. Do you not long that God should forgive you? And God is forgiving, merciful. Then Abu Bakr said, indeed I long that God shall forgive me. And he returned to Mistah and gave him what he had been used to giving him, and said, I swear I will never withdraw it from him. The Prophet likewise, after a certain time had elapsed, showed great generosity to Hassan, and he married his cousin Hamna, Mus'ab's widow, to Talha, by whom she had 2 sons. Now, here, the interesting part at the end, so the Prophet, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq would give charity to Mistah. On a daily basis, give charity. So he would give charity, and yet still, he did this slander, the rumors he spread against, say, the Aisha and say that Abu Bakr Siddiq, when this happened, he said, look, I'm not giving him charity anymore. Look what he's done. He was within his right. He was angry. But then he still, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, the revelation comes on the back of that. So this is the story of the, kind of very, very difficult incident, in fact, of all the kind of trials that the Prophet ﷺ went through in the period of his revelation. This was the most difficult for the Prophet ﷺ, and then many wisdoms in how it transpired, what happened during the period and so forth. And the last lesson, however, as I'm just mentioning here, is an important lesson about what Allah's saying. Allah's saying, one, don't repeat gossip, especially because you might think it's a small thing, right? You might think it's a small thing, but it's tremendous in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reason it is tremendous is because it causes a lot of pain. A lot of pain to those who are affected by it. But the second here is the message that was to Abu Bakr Siddiq, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu. And this is about, this Abu Bakr Siddiq. Abu Bakr was justifiably angry with this cousin of his that he had been supporting, that he had been looking after. The same cousin has turned around and is slandering his daughter. He's spreading rumors about his daughter being unfaithful to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If there's any kind of reason to be angry with someone, it's this. He's not saying I'm going to attack him, I'm going to hit him, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. He's merely saying, the voluntary charity I gave you, I'm giving you this voluntary charity, I'm not going to give him anymore. And look at that, that's his right. Okay? No one is forcing him to give voluntary charity, but look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down a revelation about this. It's not like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, give the guy a break that would have had the same kind of effect, but there's this important message. Hence it came in revelation. Forgive people who have wronged you, overlook the faults of people who have wronged you. Why? Do you not wish that God forgives you? Okay, if you're not going to forgive others with your kind of justifiable anger at them because they really genuinely wronged you, but if you can't find it in your heart to forgive the wrong someone has done to you, how can you then turn around and expect to receive the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he is justifiably angry with you because you have wronged him? So just to finish off quickly then, and so Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, actually on the day that was flogged, the flogging took place, he actually gave him charity then. He gave him charity on that day, so continued. Just a few points we finish off on then. The story of Sayyidina Aisha, one of them is that the kind of denial of the innocence of Sayyidina Aisha is considered kufr. Okay, the denial of the innocence of Sayyidina Aisha is considered kufr because there is a very clear Quranic verse that exonerates her. Okay, the second is that the verse is a proof of the inimitability of the Quran, because the Prophet ﷺ, the matter was so significant. Obviously, it was his love for his wife. Very well known. It was he loved Sayyidina Aisha to bits. So he had that, but because the people would have just not accepted his word about the innocence, because they just said, oh, he loves her to bits. Obviously, he's blinded by love. He's going to say that. Okay, so when you have this revelation, the verse comes down exonerating her, and everybody accepts it. Why? Because they all knew that the Prophet ﷺ was unable to imitate the divine speech. Okay, the divine speech was inimitable. Nobody could imitate it. So those words could only have come from God. So it's not like the Prophet ﷺ, okay, I really need something really, really strong. I can make up a verse. Everyone, even the hypocrites, knew that Prophet ﷺ, of all people, of all human beings, no human being could make up a verse. Remember this 20 years into the period of revelation, there's been a standing challenge to the whole of Arabia, to the most eloquent poets, rhetoricians of the Arabs. If you're in any doubt that this is a revelation that has come to my servant, bring a surah like it. And if you can't and you won't, then be aware of the fire. Okay, then have taqwa for the fire, right? Because this is a standing challenge, and no one has been able to do it, despite every effort that has been made of all the attacks on the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, no one said, no problem, there's something, and just like the Quran, not a single person. Okay, everyone knew Quranic speech was inimitable. The believers knew it, the disbelievers knew it. Okay, and it was the evidence that this is a proof of the innocence of Sayyidina Aisha, that these words had to have come from God, because the Prophet ﷺ, of all people, the Prophet ﷺ was unable to imitate them in his own speech. And also you have this thing of, and I've mentioned this before as well, the delay. As same as when we spoke about, and when we done the module on the Quran, we spoke about after first revelation, you had that period gap. Yeah, the story of when the people went to the Jews in Yathrib and those 3 questions were asked. And there was that silence for what, 15 days, 18 days. And you know, the Quraysh thought, yeah, we've got him now, we've got the Prophet ﷺ. Because the point here was that it's not a case of you ask the Prophet ﷺ and then straight away, because this is some of the argument that people have, you know, even now day and age as well, that, you know, the Prophet ﷺ was, you know, a just person and an amazing person, but there was no revelation. Everything came from within him. Okay, he would sit down, meditate, whatever, and all this came from within him. If that was the case here, then why was there a gap then? Why was this month of silence kind of thing? When this came about, right, Prophet could have come about and said, here you go, the Quran says that, you know, she's innocent. But no, you still had that month, that kind of period of quiet, you know, quietness. There's nothing, there's no revelation that took place. Okay, so again, proof for the Quran. Apologies, we've overrun. So it's kind of welcome back. But I wanted to kind of complete this section. Inshallah, it's been beneficial, but we'll continue inshallah next week. We leave it at that then. وصلى الله سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وسلم عليه سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين برحمته يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله